Greetings, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is a little weird, right? Feels like you're staring at a different person. For those of you who are used to watching this channel every day, I've got a tie on, my Oklahoma State University branded tie that I won on eBay in an auction like 15 years ago. I've got my new glasses on. I've got my new hair. I am fixing to go to an awards ceremony for several talented current and former students that are being honored in Tulsa at the River Spirit Casino, and I'm going to go make an appearance for the first time since this was offered because I have so many students that did great and that invited me to go support them. And that's one of the greatest honors of your life is when you teach people and they want you to celebrate in their success that they earned themselves. So I'm starting off with no hat, and I'm also starting off with a presentation. A presentation that, for the sake of today, I'm just to get rid of this PayPal border, and I'm gonna expand my webcam so that we end up essentially having it just be you, me, and this story, you know, this story. Because I have today a goal. And that is to tell everybody who has ever watched my channel, or maybe this is the first video you've ever seen, how I got here. How I got this ability to teach college, to make this YouTube video, and by all accounts, to be successful enough to have made it. I still can't believe that the story that I'm about to share with you is real. It's hard to believe that I'm talking about myself and not someone else, and I think that's kind of how I've gotten through it over the years. I've talked to people as if I'm talking about someone that I'm narrating their story, not my own story. It's a coping mechanism. There are going to be some things that I've never shared with my YouTube subscribers, that I've never shared publicly with anyone, and it's scary to talk about those things, and I'm a little nervous about being so public about them, but I do it because there are people, statistically speaking, watching this that have gone through as bad of the experiences that I've been through or much worse that could benefit from having just a little slice of hope today. A couple weeks ago, recently, went back to my hometown of Ruidoso, New Mexico. My high school logo, my town logo is the top left logo on the screen. And for the first time in almost 20 years, I spoke to kids at the high school that I graduated with and to the college locally. And then it was the greatest week of my life. I got to give back to my community, this small little town that so many people have never heard of outside of some tourism spots in New Mexico. But as fate would have it, the audio didn't record my presentation, and the visuals crashed. When life wrecks your plans, you can either complain about it, or you can say, I bet I could do even better if I do it in my studio. So this video is only because my presentation that was supposed to be put on YouTube eventually did not successfully make it onto the internet. But I think, in some ways, this one's going to be even better. So pull up a chair if you're driving. This is going to be one heck of a podcast to listen to, but there are visuals that you may want to check out as I talk about my journey as a triplet and as someone who never thought I would be where I am today. This is a castle. This is a castle in Ruidoso, New Mexico, but this is not where I was born. This is not where my brothers and I were born. We were born in San Antonio, Texas on March 27th, 1988. And we lived in the New Braunfels, Texas area, between that and Seguin, Texas, for about 8 years, from 1988 until 1996. And then our grandparents, who had vacationed and traveled by RV, our mom's parents, wanted to go to Ruidoso, and we decided to move with them. And basically, it was late summer of 1996, and we had no idea as kids that we were about to leave Texas, all that we'd ever known, and go to New Mexico. I don't even, I don't think I even knew where Mexico was on a map, nevertheless a new one. And so this was one of the first images I have and memories I have of moving to New Mexico, because we had to drive through this castle to get to our government subsidized apartment, Camelot Apartments, above Crown Drive, above Camelot Castle. Now, when I say government housing, I'm talking about, imagine maybe 400 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. These are for people who are fresh out of jail, people who cannot afford housing because they don't have a college degree or no way to make more than minimum wage, or they flat out don't have the mental capacity to hold down a job. We take for granted that there are a lot of people in society who just don't have the social skills and the resilience and the drive to work a job, especially with the prices now after COVID and inflation, where people can afford rent without depending on their family, without living with their family, without living with multiple roommates or friends. I know people who are married who have roommates, because even when you're married, that doesn't mean you can afford housing. And so my story is a story that starts on government housing, food stamps, and credit cards. That's how my brothers and I grew up in Ruidoso, New Mexico. Our mom never made more than $16,000 a year, and I think I'm rounding up considerably some years that she made that. I'm pretty sure she didn't make it to $10,000 as a single parent. A single parent of 3 boys. That is a young picture of my brothers and I from when I believe we were in Texas. It was taken around Christmas time. Cody and Dylan are my 2 brothers. One is 2 minutes older. The other one is 28 minutes younger. We moved to Ruidoso in August of 1996, maybe I guess late July technically. And we instantly were Ruidoso famous, because we went from being in this fairly large Texas town where I don't even know if people really knew us, to being the only triplets in the history of this very small town of like 8 to 10,000 year-long locals at that time. It was like being dropped into the smallest of stages, and we were Ruidoso famous because we would walk around town to get to places, because we oftentimes did not have a reliable car as a family. We would walk to middle school. For 2 years, we walked down a mountain across multiple highways, I wouldn't recommend it, and to middle school. So we didn't take the bus, we could sleep in a little bit longer, and as a pack, these huge kids would just walk down. We grew 3 inches a year and 4 shoe sizes a year for 4 straight years. If you thought it was hard for you to get a date in middle school, we couldn't get a date on a calendar. And if you don't think Bigfoot exists, he does. He's in our family. My brothers and I all had insane shoe sizes. I had the smallest at one point with a 16. The other 2 had a 17 and a half and an 18. And none of us really grew after the 8th grade. So we had a bigger shoe size than our age for a while. And when I say famous not like people stop and take pictures and want your autograph. Famous like you're a zoo animal, sort of. Like you're walking Alvin and the Chipmunks meets uncoordinated Big Bird. We were a spectacle. You slowed down and you said, "There's the triplets. There they go. Ha ha. Look at those interesting kids." But, I got to go back to New Mexico and ask for the first time in my 30s, like, what are your memories of us when we were kids, when we were 8 years old? And the town would say, "We thought you guys were really smart. We thought your mom was a great parent. We thought that you guys were kind of like a treasure to the community, like something we could be proud of." And y'all, I could go on for hours about the amount of strangers and locals in the Ruidoso and Lincoln County community that adopted my family, that gave my mom help with school supplies or food, that helped us pay rent when we needed to pay rent, that sometimes for Christmas would put us on the angel tree so we would have more toys under the tree that our mom wouldn't have to worry about maximizing her credit card to afford. And our mom did a really good job clothing us and feeding us and giving us the essentials. We never worried about not being able to eat or not being able to have a roof. We learned the difference growing up so poor between what we wanted and what we needed. And what we wanted was not really relevant because we didn't want to make our mom feel guilty that she couldn't buy us even a 25-cent NFL sticker helmet at a local grocery store. We had each other. We had our crazy triplet bond. And when you're a triplet, you grow up as a triplet, it's not a big deal. Even though we are the rarest form of triplets. Two identical, one fraternal, one egg that splits, one that doesn't. To this day, I've never met another set of triplets like us. I know they exist, but they are very few and far between. I think it was easier for us to be quadruplets than it was to be triplets based off of our genetics. And we are also the only multiple births in our family history, which makes it even weirder. In this town, our mom did the best she could, but she made almost nothing. We did not have a driver's license growing up. We kind of failed driver's ed. The town tried to get us there, but we couldn't afford car insurance anyway, and we didn't have time to get a job in high school. We played too many sports. In fact, in the town, we kind of did everything. All-state choir, all three of us, multiple years. We played basketball, we played tennis, and we sang. That picture on the right is us singing the national anthem in our basketball uniforms on every home game in 3-part harmony a cappella. I guess that's what the kids would call a flex. And we were an attraction. Again, I'm not saying we were famous in the traditional sense. I don't think I've ever been famous in the traditional sense, but I was famous in the sense that people knew we were the triplets. That is both a blessing and a curse because you are 1/3 of something. When we would have birthday parties, people would come over and they would get us one gift. We would have one cake and one gift. And so we would get like the Finding Nemo DVD. And so when we went to college, we actually had to do rock, paper, scissors to see who got the birthday gifts. And most of my birthday gifts, because my brothers were much better at rock, paper, scissors, made it to colleges in New Mexico and Oregon. But when you're a triplet and you grow up in a small town and you're that poor, you don't feel it. I never felt poor growing up because I felt rich with love from an amazing community that supported us. Our mom's parents, our grandparents were incredible, and our mom did a heck of a lot with very little resources and very little college education. She dropped out of college. She never finished. And I still think she could go back and graduate because she is that smart. She's a very smart woman. So I was a triplet, which means I wasn't really Shane. I didn't know who I was individually because I didn't really have an identity individually. Until in 8th grade, I had to do a job shadow day at the Ruidoso News, the local newspaper, and that is me. I'm just going to hide my webcam real quick so you can see the date on this very old photo, a photo that is well over 20 years old. This is me from February 1st, 2002 in Job Shadow Day during 8th grade, where I went and for the first time walked into a newspaper and fell in love with storytelling. My brothers and I, our mom would take us out of town sometimes, and we would go, and she would say, go play in the backyard. And then she'd hang out with her friends for 8 hours. And we would be in the backyard with no toys, no electronics. We couldn't afford like a Game Boy. Are you kidding me? We would just have each other. And so we would tell stories to pass the time. We would grow super close as a brotherhood. We were a pact. The blessings of that is that you're never alone in life. You always have somebody to talk to. And we talk every day, multiple times a day, to this day. But the curse is that you don't really have an identity outside of being a triplet. And so this was the first time that I felt like I had an identity outside of being a triplet. I was a writer who got to tell stories. And I verbally told stories all the time to my brothers to pass the time when we were outside in the woods playing or at friends' houses or just, that was our go-to. We always knew we could hang out and pass the time by talking together. I didn't know that whole time that I was practicing being a storyteller for publications. And so that was the first time that I realized, heck, I kind of want to do this journalism thing. That sounds like a really fun job and something I could actually be good at. But I didn't have a plan. I came from nothing. Government housing, no money, negative bills. We didn't live paycheck to paycheck because we weren't that rich. We lived every month knowing we were not going to be able to pay a bill and that bill collectors were constantly going to be calling our house asking for why the credit card payments didn't go through. That's the level of poor that I grew up in. Our mom didn't want us to answer the phone because she knew that there were bill collectors. This was before cell phones. This was a landline phone that was very expensive to make calls, and that was oftentimes ringing because it was just people wanting to take my mom's little bit of money away. There were even times where we would have to unplug the phone because it would just ring nonstop with those bill collectors. That's the world that I come from. And yet I'm staring into a camera from a computer that was paid for thanks to YouTube with a tie at a university that took a chance on me. A second university, I should tell you, that took a chance on me. We'll get to that. So that was 8th grade. And then when I was a sophomore, my 8th grade mentor, Miss Dorley Steerwalt, coached me to be the voice of my hometown Ruidoso's Optimist Club competition. I won the city, I won the region, and then I went to the equivalent of state/regional finals. All of New Mexico and West Texas, from Pecos to El Paso. And the only other person who'd ever made it that far in this competition in all the years that we had been in it was a man by the name of Neil Patrick Harris, who was known as Doogie Howser growing up. And then he became Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother and has hosted countless award shows and been the face of our hometown. But the problem is he left after 8th grade. He went to Albuquerque, and that's kind of where he calls home. And so he never came back and really thanked Ruidoso. And there are so many people who to this day still brag about how great of a kid he was when he was in The Wizard of Oz and other things. Like, he was a child star in my hometown, but he kind of washed his hands of it when he left. And I'm not blaming him for that. I'm just saying it's different when your town continues to get poorer and poorer and the people who make it out don't come back to help. Because it's easy to wash your hands and say, oh, I did it, I'm a success. None of us have ever done anything alone. And my story, our story, my brothers and I's story, my family story, is the story of both strangers and neighbors and friends and family, making us feel like we're the most precious Dragon Balls of like Dragon Ball Z. And you hold them and you carefully nourish them. They're fragile, they're sensitive, but they've got so much potential if they make it out, and you don't want them to stop shining bright. You want them to be shooting stars. You don't want them to just fade into the darkness. And so I won. I won it all for Ruidoso. And there were ladies at this place who remembered Neil Patrick Harris maybe a couple of decades ago and called me Tall Neil because I was 6'3" in sophomore year of high school. And so I won it all for Ruidoso, and I was so proud to come back to Ruidoso. The Optimist Club, they threw me a party. They gave me a plaque. I got my first college scholarship. I think it was $1,000. And I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude and pride for representing New Mexico, my hometown, in Lincoln County. And that is going to tie big time into the end of this video. May 2006, I graduated high school. That is my high school senior photo. I definitely was wearing a Sonic shirt. That shirt was not cool then. I don't know what I was thinking fashion-wise to put that shirt over that t-shirt. I have no defense of that. No driver's license, no car, almost no money. Just a couple of checks from graduation. But I had a dream, and that dream was to go to the #1 journalism school in the United States. Which, when I asked Jeeves in middle school, before Google was a thing, ask your parents, kids, what Ask Jeeves was. I bet they've got some fun stories. When I Googled, before Google, when I internet searched top journalism schools, the University of Missouri came up #1 in Columbia, Missouri. I'd never heard of it. I'd never been to Missouri. I had no plans to ever go to Missouri. But if that's what I love to do, especially after learning about journalism at the Ruidoso News, then that's where I was going to go. The problem is that I could not get higher than a 26 on my ACT, and so I missed every scholarship that Missouri provided out-of-state students by 1 point on the ACT. So in order to go to my dream school that I had no plans on how I was going to survive, because I didn't know anybody, I didn't have any money, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a cell phone, I just had myself and my dream. Literally, that's it. And like a sack. Almost like a hobo sack you'd see like strung over the back of you. I just had a dream and a plan. On paper, this was a horrible idea. There were people in town that tried to talk me out of it because I could have stayed in state for free. I could have gotten paid to go to school because New Mexico really has a great program, at least they did back when I was in high school, where the lottery system helps pay for your education. I left the lottery system to have to take out over $20,000 to $30,000 worth of student loans in my name and my mom's name because she had to sign off on a loan that she could not pay in order to just get dropped off at Mizzou. But my high school guidance counselor said, if you get dropped off and if you get accepted to Missouri, I will drive and my wife and I will drive and we will personally drop you off and make sure you get there. Wow, what a gift. So, I got dropped off in August of 2006 at the University of Missouri with no plan. You can see Jesse Hall, the administration building, the main building, that is like a beacon in Columbia, Missouri. I called it my new Disneyland because every time I saw it, I just got filled with inspiration and hope, and I wanted to make an impact, and it inspired me. The columns in front where the old Jesse Hall burned down inspired me to not only love Missouri, but to make friends. Also, this is amazing. This is a 20-minute speech, and the alarm is going off to test the alarm system outside for tornadoes in Oklahoma. Let's pause this and go to part 2. See you in a second when the sirens aren't going off. Welcome back to part 2 of an accidental 2-part video, because I tell my students this all the time. You can't... They just said this test is now complete outside. That's amazing. You can't anticipate when life throws you curveballs. You can either adjust and sort of laugh at your predicament, or you can be a victim and complain and not rise. One of my favorite movies of all time is Batman Begins. Even though The Dark Knight gets all the praise, Batman Begins has a ton of amazing theme statements. And one of those theme statements is, why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves up. And that's part of this story, is the times that I have quote-unquote fallen in my life are the times that somebody's always been there to pick me up. And yes, I've helped pick myself up at times, but it's been with the assistance of loving strangers. Because when I went to Mizzou, I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know I was in the system. I had to send all my stuff in the mail, and there was a really kind gentleman by the name of Dr. Lynn Willard, who was the husband of my high school senior English teacher, Miss Willard, and he offered to have me visit Mizzou, but the only time we could do it was during my spring break, which was during Mizzou's spring break. So nobody was on campus. I didn't even know what it looked like to have students. It was empty, and there was a tornado that hit close to Columbia during that week. That's really what I remember most from that trip. And so I got to campus. I didn't know anybody, and imagine, even in 2006, I didn't have a cell phone. So when I met people, when I made friends, I had no way to talk to them once I walked away. They would say, "What's your phone number?" And I would say, "I don't have one." That was really embarrassing to tell people, because they'd look at me like I was really poor. And I guess it was because I was, because I didn't know in Ruidoso that I was poor. But when I went to Missouri and was amongst a bunch of kids whose parents would drop them off and take them out to dinner and cook them home-cooked meals and do their laundry, I never got any of that. It was years before anyone visited me from my family at Missouri, because it was too expensive. No one could afford to visit me. I was by myself on an island, and where some people might say that island is like an island of misfit toys, for me it was an island like a Disneyland, because my mom did the best she could, and I'm going to talk more about this, but when I left that house, and I had to literally run away from home toward the end of it because it got so toxic. My mom, when she snapped, she would become a different person. When you are dealing with manic, bipolar people, manic, bipolar tendencies, the emotions can ratchet so quickly that you'll go from thinking you're safe to being in a knockdown, drag-out fight in the blink of an eye. And my mom, when I left for Mizzou and my guidance counselor came to pick me up, she barely said goodbye, because she said, I'll see you in a couple months for Thanksgiving. I'll have to deal with you then. It was the least, cinematic goodbye you would ever see to a huge, monumental, on-paper move. But that's the reality of what I left. When I got to Columbia, Missouri, it was like everybody was not only so friendly, but my goal was to make friends every day, because that was my goal, just to meet people, because I'd never been really out of New Mexico. So I would walk up to whoever was sitting by themselves at lunch or dinner. I was very single at this point, very single. And I would ask if they minded if I would sit with them, and I would just want to get to know people. And sometimes it would be young women who were by themselves, and I didn't want them to be creeped out by asking if I could sit with them, so I'd make up that my girlfriend just left and I just needed somebody to sit with if I minded it. And, nobody ever said no. Some did. They're probably like, I don't want to talk to the stranger, sit by them. But they were nice, and I would ask their background, and I would sort of just interview them and get to know them, and then I would tell them about me, and I had no self-confidence at this point. So I wasn't Shane Hoffman, I was a triplet. So I'd be like, who are you? I'm a triplet. Like, that was what I led in. And that's not the healthiest thing to do, but that's what my identity was in August of 2006. I was a triplet from New Mexico. I wouldn't even tell my name for minutes. And they'd be like, what's your name? Like, oh yeah, I didn't tell you my name. My name's Shane. Because even that was weird. A couple of girls were actually interested in dating me my freshman year, and I thought I was being punked because I had no self-confidence that I was a good catch because I was so poor and I had no resources and I had no plan. And I finally got to meet to try to figure out my resources with someone called the financial aid advisor in the fall of 2006, right before the semester started, to talk about funding because I was in so much debt immediately upon entering campus. And Israel, my lovely fiance, who's also in this video, is calling. Interruption number 2. I'm sorry, girl. I've got to turn it on Do Not Disturb as I work to get through the rest of this. I love you, though. I'll call you after this. That means nothing to anyone but her. Okay, so I met with my financial aid advisor, and I was like, hey, can you help me? I kind of don't have any money, and I need some money. And it turns out everybody says that, so, my sob story wasn't going to get any sympathy, nor should it have been. She looked at my resume, and I was like expecting her to be like, wow, you're really poor. Here's some money. That's not how this works. She looks at me, and she goes, wow, you got a pretty low ACT score, 26? I think the average for the journalism school is a 34. Okay, cool. And I see that you don't really have any scholarships from us. You're taking out a bunch of loans. I've seen this situation before where a poor kid tries to come to a university school out of state and make it big, and you just get overwhelmed. It's too expensive. You don't have enough help. You don't have a plan, and you are home by Thanksgiving. And so she looked at me and said, son, looking at this sheet, I wouldn't be surprised if you were home by Thanksgiving. And in that moment, it hit me, the odds that were stacked up against me for the first time. Because I had never had someone lay it out in such blunt language how on paper screwed I was. But this was my Disneyland. Look at that green grass. Look at those columns. I didn't want to leave my Disneyland, so I told her, I said, ma'am, you're probably right. I'm probably, on paper, not supposed to be here. But when somebody doubts you in life, YouTube, you can do one of two things. You can believe them, and you can have that doubt manifest itself into your future. You can let them determine the path of your life. Or you can say, with all due respect, I think you're wrong. I've got that New Mexico grit that I don't think too many people around here know about. I had to go, and my brothers and I had to go to basketball games at 10 o'clock at night and play varsity basketball 4 hours away from our mountain town and get home at 3 a.m. from a district match and then get up at 6 o'clock 3 hours later and go to high school while having a mom that couldn't afford the gas in the car that she drove us to the high school. So, this is supposed to stop me? This is a joke. This is like a 5-star resort that I have access to. Yes, I'm taking out a ton of loans that I have to pay back, but I'll worry about that later. Let me just enjoy the fact that I made it out and I'm at the #1 journalism school in the world, even if I am the least qualified journalism student in the history of this university. So, that was August of 2006. But I knew that I could not afford to stay there if I kept up the loans and the bills and the lack of resources. And so on top of making new friends every day that were incredibly kind, and I signed up for something called Facebook that was new, that had just come out. MySpace at this point was more popular than Facebook, if you can believe that. Most people don't know what MySpace is now. I signed up for a Facebook account, so every time I made a friend, I'd add them on Facebook, and I would message them, or write on their wall. I don't think Messenger even existed back then. And that's how I got to meet up with people at the dining halls, or I got to go play basketball. I made so many great friends. Shout out Gary Frank, eventually David Lamble, Brian Kramer, Dan Posey. Just a small list of people who made me feel loved every day on that campus when they didn't have to. And then on top of that, this is not going to be an overly religious video. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to be religious to watch this. If you believe in the universe or karma or whatever, that's great. To me, I am someone that believes that sometimes God puts doors in front of you. But you have to, 1, recognize that that door is there, and 2, acknowledge that door when it's behind you and step through it, not being afraid to step through it, because you know, since it's a door in front of you placed by God, that whatever is on the other side is going to be better than if you never had the courage to step through it. And that door appeared on campus one day in the form of the president of the journalism college, looking out the window, I think he was eating a bagel, and probably just lost in thought with no expectation of being interrupted. But I was a new freshman student. I knew that I was in a ton of debt. I didn't have a plan. I had just made all A's and A minuses, because there was a plus minus system at Mizzou, there probably still is. So my GPA was great, but that had zero impact on getting scholarships, because I still didn't have a good enough ACT score, and I was now a college student. I couldn't even apply for those scholarships I didn't get on the journey to Mizzou. So I went up to him and I said, "Hi, sir, I know who you are. You're the president. You're Dean Brooks, and I just want you to know that if I don't find some money from somewhere, I might have to drop out of college," because I was doing the math in my head. I was going to owe well over $100,000, a law school amount of debt for a journalism degree, and journalism didn't pay a lot back then, and it kind of pays even less now. So I was nervous. I was shaking. He saw a scared kid, and he took kindness and empathy and maybe some pity on me and said, "Go find my assistant and make an appointment, and we'll talk." And so I did just that. I had no idea where his office was. I walked down. I introduced myself. I said that Dean Brooks would like to meet with me and who I was. And then the next week I met with him, and he pulled out my transcript, and he saw my ACT score and said, "Wow, I'm surprised you did so well your first semester with that score." I was like, "Oh, thanks, buddy." But he said, I'll make you a deal. If you keep a 3.5, which is a really high GPA at this school, especially a 3.5 or higher the rest of your college career, you'll get, I think it was $1,000 scholarship. But that was the first time that somebody had believed in me enough to give me an academic scholarship on campus. That was huge. And then on top of that, there was a really popular show called Hey Arnold, a cartoon show in the 90s and early 2000s on Nickelodeon that my brothers and I used to fall in love with, because Arnold had his own room and all three of us had to share a room. And remember, they're 6'5", almost 6'6". We have no floor space. All three of us are sharing a room that's smaller than a college dorm room. We had literally just a closet and a little bit of floor, and our beds were connected like Tetris blocks. And that was our background. So the most space I'd ever had to my name was half of my college dorm room. It felt like I was living in a mansion. And my dream was to have my own room someday. That was like literally making it. I didn't care about getting married. I didn't care about having kids. I didn't care about a house or a car. I just wanted to have my own room. That was my dream in life, to be Arnold at 18. And I knew that the resident advisor at my college was someone who got their own room. So I applied for Res Life kind of for a selfish reason, because I wanted my own room, and I knew that's how you got it. And I didn't have a nice shirt to interview with. I wore a Hawaiian shirt that was way too big for me, and I think shorts to the interview. And I was so underdressed that I probably should not have even been given the interview, but they probably felt sorry for me and listened to me. And I told them my background and how much that Missouri meant to me and how this was my new Disneyland. And they offered me a job with the caveat that I should get a better shirt. Great advice. I did end up going to Goodwill the next couple years and got amazing clothing for less than $5. So, on campus, I got my own room. How cool is that? But I couldn't afford meals, and I really couldn't afford a double rate room, and so I didn't realize how this worked. I just knew you got your own room, and so I went to my hall director when I got the offer, and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm afraid I can't accept this because it says I have to sign up for 14 meals a week, and I can't afford 10 right now, and it says that I'm going to sign up for a single room. Do I get like a discount for being an RA, or is that full price?" And this woman, who's a very kind woman, still a good friend to this day, starts laughing at me. And I start to get angry. And I said, "Ma'am, this is not a laughing matter. I can't afford to stay in college. I'm broke." And she said, "Son, this is part of your compensation." And I said, "My comp in what?" Because in New Mexico, we're 50 out of 50 in education. I don't think they taught me that word in school. Although I did come from a very good high school, and I'm very proud of that. And middle school. Ruidoso school systems at that point were top tier. For our town, it was insane. So I said, "Yeah, that's my compensation. What does that mean?" And she goes, "You don't have to pay for food next year." And y'all, I just started crying. I'm trying not to cry right now, but going back to that moment, I said, "I get free food next year?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "What about, how much is the room going to be?" And then she really started laughing. And then I got mad again because I'm like, this is not cool. And she goes, "Shane, that room's free. What? Free? I've spent $15,000 between food and housing worth of student loans my first year. You're telling me that it's free? So I ended up going from $30,000 of student loans my first year, including a large part of being in my mom's name. And by the way, I worked work-study jobs and other jobs to pay that loan off every month because since it was my mom's name, I couldn't defer it. So I had to log in as her electronically and pay it every month and make sure there was enough money in my bank account to pay it every month. So literally my bank account was just my loan money for my mom. That was all I looked at. It's not real money. It's just loan money for my mom to pay off the loan. I do not own real money. This is all fake. I need to treat it like Monopoly money. And to this day, I still kind of treat my savings account like Monopoly money to a certain extent. So on top of that, the sister of my high school senior English teacher, the one whose husband took me to the tour senior year, her and her husband let me live in their house rent-free and walk to a gas station every morning to get residency in Missouri, because they back then, if you stayed in the summer between your freshman and sophomore years, they let you get in-state tuition and become an in-state resident, and that saved me an additional $10,000 to $15,000 a year for the next 4 years because I was there for 5 years. All in all, between in-state tuition and residential life, I saved over $40,000 of student loans that drastically improved my chances of staying on campus. And yes, I studied hard and I worked hard, but it was the kindness of so many strangers that kept me confident and safe and in a position to not give up. If all those people had turned their back on me, I would have been back in New Mexico trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. And so this is another example, another chapter of the kindness of strangers. So this is a picture right before all that happened. I took a swig of Hawaiian Punch right before all those blessings happened. I thought I was going to be a magazine model. Somebody offered to take a picture of me in front of campus thinking that I would do like a gas station photo of drinking a Hawaiian Punch on campus for the local convenience store. I took it, I gave it to them, and they did not use it. They rejected the photo. I did not. My gas station model days were over before they were begun. But I had hope that I had a future. And when I came back in 2007, I was a resident advisor. And one of the first things that I did, besides have my own room, which was the greatest thing ever, was I went out and I got pied in the face for charity. I did a Relay for Life fundraiser for my building where residents could pie me in the face. And I remember thinking, how did I get here? Like, I look at that kid in that photo and I think, how did I get here? Because crazy things just kept happening. Like, in 2008, I ran into President Bill Clinton on campus by sort of sneaking into a back entrance of the residential, well, I shouldn't say residential, it's really just the rec center, with a buddy after a basketball game, and I was suddenly taking a not consensual selfie with Bill, who was very much not wanting me to be next to him, but I was that close, so I said, take my photo, right before I could have been tased by his Secret Service. I look so happy. He looks so uncomfortable. It's a great photo. My students have captioned it this semester, and it's kind of fun to get roasted by your own students and realize that, well, you've come a long way. But here's the biggest problem with my college life. By 2009, I had a cell phone. I had taken out an additional loan for a computer. I still had no car. I still had no driver's license. And when the dorms closed, which were during all breaks, and obviously summer break and winter break and even spring break, I didn't have a place to go. So I would fly back to New Mexico. I would save up my money and I'd get a plane ticket, or sometimes family would be kind enough to help buy the plane ticket, and I would fly back to Ruidoso and I would spend time with my family over breaks like anybody else would. But in December of 2008, right before January of 2009, my mom got laid off working at the Upper Canyon cabins where she lived on the property. And she went almost immediately from living in the cabin property to living in her car. Her car was her home. So by the definition of that, she was homeless for the next couple years, in and out of homelessness, when she wasn't sleeping on friends' couches and when she wasn't trying to move different states in order to figure out what her future was going to be. So all of a sudden, when the dorms closed, I didn't have a place to go. And I couldn't go back to New Mexico because it was too expensive and I didn't have a place there anyway. And so I had this horrible premonition when January of 2009 started that I was, by all accounts, homeless. And I was just about to start the biggest semester of my college career. The guy on your left, Greeley Kyle, one of the greatest professors in academia history, was a former, I think he was a lineman for the University of Tennessee, the most intimidating man ever. Literally has a persona that he jokes about, but it's not really a joke, called the Son of Satan, where he pretends to be a disgruntled photographer and follow you around and just sabotage your news report and make you have to think on your feet. Well, he started this class off, the most important class, Broadcast 2 of the Missouri journalism degree, and said, in this class, you have to earn a 0. He would literally hold up a sign, a speed limit sign, and cover like the 6 of the 60 and say, in my class, you have to earn a 0. He then handed out a pop quiz that everybody failed. And then, as you could hear weeping in the background, he would say, you have to get off this campus and find the real stories in this community and in this state to pass this class. And that's kind of a big problem when you don't have a car or a driver's license. You can't even borrow someone's car because you don't know how to drive. So I knew every story that I was going to go to was with my own 2 feet. So I emailed every single head of every department on campus and in town asking if there were any stories that weren't being covered in town that I could walk to, including sometimes sneaking in. I'm going to hide my webcam again real quick on the right side. I did an investigative story where I went into, I think, a science lab and talked about some genetic experiments with a woman that thought I was there for a tour, not realizing that I was working for NPR and that was part of my job, because in Broadcast 2, you had to do either an internship with the local NPR or NBC affiliate to get credit. And so I would walk to stories. This led to the first time I was truly homeless was spring break of 2009. And my girlfriend at the time was nice enough to say, hey, you can come sleep on my couch. You can come sleep on my couch. You don't have to worry about being homeless. Because y'all, I had identified 2 different park benches on campus that I think I could have been safe at without being arrested, but I was prepared for being arrested. Or the church that I went to, the pastor said, there's either people in the community who might be able to house you, or there are pews in here that we can give you. So to me, that was like the Ritz-Carlton. So when I say I was homeless, I wasn't begging for money on the street corner. I was too proud to do that, and honestly, I was too scared to do that. I was too ashamed to do that. I just wanted to have a roof over my head and food. I just wanted the basic necessities that our mom provided us so well for so many years growing up, but I didn't have them without strangers' helps. So when I was sleeping on the couch of my girlfriend at the time, this was during the men's NCAA basketball tournament, and she asked me one night, have you talked to my roommate? And I said, no, is everything okay? So I went to talk to her roommate, who was still there over spring break working, and she said, yeah, my boyfriend has a perfect bracket. And I said, what? And she goes, oh, I'm sorry, not my boyfriend, my boyfriend's roommate. I said, that guy I met once that's in the band? Yeah. I said, that's impossible. I just watched ESPN Sports Center. They said there are no perfect brackets left after the first 2 rounds of the tournament. She goes, no, there's one. Turned out, back when Facebook did brackets and there was millions of entries, he was number 1. And people have been trying to reach him, but he was in the woods actually going hunting with, I think, his dad. So he didn't have cell phone service. So I got his number and I broke the story because I was in a position to break the story before the Dallas Morning News, I think the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, ESPN itself, all those places that could at least do a short report on a perfect bracket. I broke that story, and the only reason why I broke that story was because I was sleeping on my girlfriend's couch. So look, I don't want it to sound like I was thankful at the time to be doing that, because I felt guilty. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't even help her with groceries. I had to be a stray dog to so many people who had to pass me around during breaks so that I had a place to sleep. I slept on more couches and more floors and more air mattresses than I think I can even count. But without all of those people just passing me on like the Ruidoso community had formed my brothers and I and helped our mom, I would not have made it. And if I didn't have the confidence to know I could do it in Ruidoso, I wouldn't have had the confidence to know I could do it in Columbia, Missouri. And so all of this ended up being a huge blessing because I got an A+ in this man's class, one of the highest grades he has ever awarded a student in the history of his class. And it was because I broke such big news stories while not having a driver's license or, of course, access to a car. While walking and just persevering. And when I see openings to tell great stories, I tell them. And that has continued to be my YouTube model as well going forward. In the summer of 2009, I got a job on campus working summer housing, which got me summer roof over my head, so I didn't have to bother my friends to sleep on their couches. And I saved up, because I got my first real paycheck at this job in the summer of 2009. It was the first time I had like a kind of an important job where I could make a couple of grand in a summer. That's like $1 million to a kid like me from where I grew up. I saved up all my money, and for the first time ever in the summer of 2009, I flew my mom to campus. And after that summer, she stayed in the dorms with me. I was still a resident advisor. I took her to a football game. I took her out to eat. I did not make her pay for anything, and I made her turn off. She had a cell phone by then, her cell phone, because, of course, that cell phone was ringing off the hook with bill collectors. I just wanted to take care of her and show her my Disneyland. It was a huge risk because this mom had been abusive when she had lost her cool much of my life growing up. And I, in turn, had fought back and been a very hard person to be around in that setting too. A hard person to be around that my brothers had to put up with when we would have these screaming matches back and forth, and they couldn't escape because they didn't have a car or driver's license either. So when I invited her to my Disneyland, it was a huge risk, but it could not have gone better. She was so thankful to be taking care of me in a way of just being supportive of my Mizzou life. She took care of me by being a proud mom for the first time in my life. When I left high school, like I told you earlier in this video, she would barely say goodbye to me. She couldn't say goodbye to me when she left college because she was afraid she emotionally couldn't handle it because she was so moved by everything that I helped do for her. It healed the pain of my childhood in a lot of ways. And I had no idea what was in store for my life after this moment because I felt like I was sort of living almost like a fantasy life at that point. But it was about to get really crazy. Because in October 2009, my brother Cody checked his MySpace. And that MySpace had a message from a woman claiming to be our sister. We had never heard of sisters. This clearly was a joke. It was a spam. We're being punked. But she left a phone number. And he called me to ask what we should do about it. I was studying for 3 midterms that week and did not want to study another second. And so maybe it was because I wanted to procrastinate. I don't know. But I found myself calling that number, and a woman's voice actually picked up. And I said, the first thing that popped into my head, which my YouTube subscribers can say is a dangerous thing. I said, "Hi, my name is Shane Hoffman. I'm apparently your brother, and I've known about this for 30 seconds. She starts screaming all of a sudden like she's won the lottery. She starts crying. She gets very emotional, and I am not knowing how to process this. I'm kind of scarred. And she says, "You don't understand. We have been searching for you guys for almost 15 years. And YouTube, there is not a moment in your life that can prepare you for those words." I went from just a few months before feeling so homeless that I was just ridden with guilt because I didn't want to keep asking friends or girlfriends to sleep on their couches. I just wanted a home for myself. I just wanted to be loved and taken care of like all the other people in my college got to be when their parents came back and helped them. And you're telling me that I have a family that I've never met that wants to have a relationship with me? What? So, somehow, I got the courage to call up a man that I was told wanted nothing to do with me, my biological father, my sister's father as well, from a different, obviously, relationship. Same father, different mother. Half-siblings, technically, although I don't believe in the phrase half-siblings. I just say siblings. My sister found this photo, that photo, the Kangaroo University photo, tucked into another photo at a family member's house 15 years before and said, "Dad, who are those boys in the photo? I've never met them." And then the next day, he picked her up from school and said, "I know you asked about the boys. I just want you to know somewhere in the world, you have triplet brothers. Can you imagine going from that to like, now let's just go to dinner and pretend like we never talked about this? So it was always eating away at my sisters that we were out there somewhere. And then my godmother, her son worked at Lowe's in New Braunfels, Texas with my sister's husband, and found out that her sister has brothers she'd been searching for and that they knew of triplets in town 20 years before. We were the same triplets. We connected. And I cannot tell you how much better my life has been since October of 2009, because my dad is still very much in it and my sisters are very much in it. And my dad had to get an emergency liver transplant just to still be here, and got it right before his liver failed. Because nothing is crazier than finding out you have a dad that wants a relationship with you, but he also might have 6 months to live. That's just part of this story, this crazy story. Summer of 2010, a dad that we thought hated us growing up flew us to New Mexico? No. How about to Texas? He flew us to New Braunfels, Texas, and we met our sisters on the left for the first time. We met our dad on the right. He paid for everything. He could not have been more hospitable. Our stepmom could not have been more hospitable. Our sisters could. We were just loved by this family that had known about us for years and that we had no idea who they were until about 6 months before that. That led in the summer of 2010 for me to also turn the stories that I had done on the perfect NCAA bracket into a statewide competition. And for the first time since winning that Optimist competition that got me my first amount of confidence in Reed Oso, I won multiple awards against real professionals. This led to the fall of 2010, when shortly after I discovered I had family who'd been searching for me way back in 2009, 15 years ago from the time of recording this, I saw the president of the whole university, not of the journalism school, the whole university, and his wife, serving students at a dining hall, and then they wanted to actually sit down with the students and eat with the students. It was really powerful. And I walked up to him, knowing I just discovered family, I hadn't met him yet, that I didn't know existed, and that I was still technically homeless, because without Mizzou, I would not have a place to sleep. And I was getting a free home because of Res Life. So I walked up to the couple and I said, "Hi, I just want you to know that this place means everything to me, and without it, I wouldn't have a home." And the wife looked at me and she smiled and she said, "Son, can you say that again?" And I told her for the first time in my life, like 5 minutes of my background. I never told really anyone in power my story. And she said, "Let me see what I can do." I didn't know what that meant. But she sent over a young, talented writer named Marcus Wilkins to interview me for like a 150-word student profile. And he, poor guy, thought it was going to be a 15-minute conversation. And it lasted, because he told me, just start at the beginning of your background. It lasted over, I think, an hour and a half, closer to 2 hours. And when I was done, he looked at me and said, "Your story in some ways is my story. My background is not traditional. I come from hard upbringings." And he fought for this kid who never told his story to anybody to not just be a 150-word story, but to be a full spread feature. And in the fall of 2010, one of the longest features in the history of the alumni magazine, Mizzou Magazine, came out on me. My students say to this day that I look like discount Eminem on the left, and I can't help but agree. It was multi-pages. It's still, I think, somewhere online. And it put my story out in a magazine for the first time. And it felt like I had reached my pinnacle of my life. It's sort of a theme with my life. Well, that next year, it landed on the doorstep of a man named Dave Hudziker, who's the official voice of Oklahoma State athletics. And he offered to bring me in to campus and have me work with him to produce Oklahoma State home football games. This was after I was named one of the top 39 seniors of my graduating class, an honor that's one of the highest. I had friends and former residents come and cheer me on and hold up a sign with my name during a basketball game halftime ceremony. That's my graduation photo of May 2011. That's me with the head football coach, a very young Mike Gundy, holding a Big 12 championship trophy the last year the University of Missouri was at Oklahoma State, which, by the way, I'm not from Oklahoma, obviously. I knew nothing about Oklahoma. I knew that Oklahoma was involved in the first bowl game, the Dust Bowl. Everybody lost. And I also knew that I was someone who basically didn't want to be in Oklahoma. I loved Missouri. I loved New Mexico. I came to Oklahoma kicking and screaming. I said, I'm going to be there for 2 years. They offered me a free master's degree if I came to produce and be a teaching assistant. And I thought I had made it and my life had peaked, because in a lot of ways it had. But then the first semester that I was a teaching assistant, the professor that I was under had to be, had an emergency, a health emergency. And I had to teach his classes. I had to take over. And this was with such short notice that no other professors could really help me until I needed to figure out final grades. So I was sent in to basically do a full-time college job with Subway gift cards as my payment. And I did a good enough job to where I tried to take what I learned at Missouri and put that into the teaching of these classes. But more than that, I hated TV when I graduated. I was a radio guy. But these classes that I was supposed to TA were video production classes. So I had to go online every night and teach myself more about video production, more about editing. I had to basically be self-taught to teach classes that I was not qualified at all to teach, to help out this university that was getting me a free master's degree. And I got to say this, my brother Dylan, also, when our dad told us that he was a 100% disabled veteran, he served in Vietnam, my brother was in Salem, Oregon going to college, and he met with officials in Salem and convinced them to give us back pay, even though our dad wasn't even in our life at that point. And that back pay paid off all of the loans that were left in my mom's name that I had taken out my freshman year at Mizzou. That money helped me pay for rent because I got that money still to go to grad school in Oklahoma. My brother and his courage and his tenacity saved me at least an additional $20,000. That is an example of how my brothers have just the same grind, New Mexico work ethic that I do. May 2013, I graduated with my master's degree. I clearly don't know how to hold a diploma, by the way. And I thought I was done. I thought my time in Oklahoma was over. I thought I might go back to Columbia, Missouri, apply for some jobs, try to give back, maybe go back to New Mexico. And they offered me a 1-year visiting teaching assistant position. It wasn't a teaching assistant position. It was a real teaching job with my master's at 25. I still felt unqualified. I'm sure there were a lot of people who I worked with that felt like I was unqualified. Imposter syndrome was as real as it ever is going to get in this scenario. But I took over a class like a couple weeks before it started, after I graduated in the summer of 2013 with my master's, and I just tried to make it the most fun class possible while learning the most. I made it more project-based, less test-based, which is still my philosophy to this day. I believe everything you do in college you should be able to use to get a job, because most tests are made to cram and then forget. Not in my classes. That is my first headshot as a college professor at 25. I ended up winning a student-nominated award that I had no idea even existed after the first semester in April of 2014. And I think to this day you can only win it once. So the joke is I peaked 6 months into the job. But I was so proud in April 2014 of that, because it made me feel like I actually maybe was qualified to teach. Maybe not. But I felt like I was at least kind of good at the job. And then I decided to do something really crazy, because a couple years later I was actually engaged to a friend of mine from Missouri, and I could tell that it was not a good match. She was going to be miserable. I was going to be miserable. She was going to have to leave her whole life and move to Oklahoma just to make it work. I called off the engagement and spiraled into a very dark depression. I decided to take the advice of my brother Dylan, the same one that got us the money from Salem, Oregon, and some very kind Congress people that worked with him. Our dad is also a union man and is very good at making phone calls. And I rebranded it from a pizza and Oreo channel that had made nothing, no money. It was like 50 subscribers who just were friends from Facebook that would just dislike every video I posted. So imagine posting a video. It's got 0 recorded views and 6 dislikes in 30 seconds. That was every video I posted, with Craigslist sketchy looking lighting. But I was just trying to find a way to get comfortable talking to a camera by myself, because when you have a radio background too, you have to talk sometimes for hours by yourself with no audience. You're literally just talking to a microphone or maybe a camera, if you've got a camera that's part of your telecast. I was playing a game called Marvel Contest of Champions. I downloaded it because it was how, I wouldn't recommend this. I was trying to stay busy during the times when I was not teaching because they kept bringing me back on one-year contracts. I never got a promotion. I never got a raise, but they kept bringing me back on the same contract, and they would for the next 10 years at Oklahoma State. But I wanted some media experience. I was hungry to do something on my own and not just teach. I wanted to get into new media. And so I transformed my channel into a Marvel Contest of Champions YouTube channel, and it immediately got more views than the pizza. It would get 50 views, maybe 100 views sometimes. Triple digits, that's like impossible. Now, I never thought I'd make any money at this point, but I didn't care. People were watching my channel. And somebody from Finland commented and said, "Great video, love from Finland, keep it up." And I'm like, how the heck did you get this? How did the algorithm promote this? I still, to this day, have no idea. The joke in the community for a long time was, who is Prof. Hoff and why is he successful? Why is he here? That YouTube channel took off like a rocket. And if you think about YouTube success like Mr. Beast, then you're not going to agree. But this was not Mr. Beast. This was a man who had been homeless and had not had a dollar to his name when he got dropped off on campus, now making as much as $5 a video. Imagine that you couldn't afford a $5 hamburger growing up, and somebody would give you a $5 bill for making a YouTube video about a game you're not even good at. Wouldn't that be a chance to grind a little bit? Because that's what I did. I went from uploading a video a week to a video a day to multiple videos a day to, we'll get to it. I was sort of like a triplet back in Rito. I was this weird professor that was making YouTube videos and growing a channel. And I went to New York City to meet some of my fans and subscribers at New York City Comic-Con in 2018, which is why I was wearing Captain America's suit. I dressed up for Comic-Con. I got to go as a college professor and a YouTuber and meet people, and they were so friendly. And the people who were way more successful than me in the community, like Dork Lessons and Brian Grant, and Seton, names that this community would be familiar with, all said hello. They were super kind to me. They didn't ostracize me. I expected them to talk smack to me, to make fun of me. I felt like I probably deserved it in a way because I was so inexperienced, but they didn't. They were just really nice. The people from Kabam who made the game were also really nice. And so then the word got out that I was in New York, and then I got sort of, not really, but sort of like news coverage famous. The local ABC channel in Oklahoma City, KOCO, did a big feature on me, sent a camera crew and a reporter to follow me around for a day. I then got featured in the business section of the state newspaper, The Oklahoman. It said, "Professor's alter ego is YouTube star." Again, the word star makes me cringe because I'm not really a star in the traditional sense, but I am in the sense of someone who went from being homeless to making money on YouTube. And then I even got on a podcast, shout out my man, Sean Dillon, a great podcast host who really is a star in his own right. And then I even got to speak at the local Comic-Con, which was called Lexicon in Stillwater. My YouTube career was like when I was technically homeless at Missouri. I wanted to work smarter, not harder, because I only had so many hours in the day. I would not edit these videos. I would do them in one take. They were often filled with stutters, filled with factual errors. Some of the videos were truly embarrassing to put out, but I was just trying to report. And people were subscribing. And I started to broadcast, and people were coming by. And they were donating money to me. To this day, I can't explain it. I did not view myself as being worthy of a financial contribution. But every single broadcast, and now I've done over 2,000 of them in less than 6 years on this channel, somebody has donated at least a penny. I can't explain it. I grew up not having birthday parties, remember? And now every time I broadcast, that is a birthday cake picture behind me because I was, by all accounts, a success. 15,000 plus videos in 6 years. Most of them made less than $10. A lot of them made less than $5. But they all added up, and I saved almost everything I made that wasn't taxed into a savings account that I didn't touch because I was basically trained to do that. I then met the love of my life, Israel, the woman who tried calling me, and unfortunately I couldn't accept her call during this. And I fell in love with a single mom, y'all. A single mom that had adopted two high needs girls who were from a very, very abusive home that made my home look like it was, Hey Arnold, you know? She had a heart for loving people and for taking people in who needed love. And she fell in love with me, not because I was a YouTuber, not because I was a college professor, just because I had a huge heart for gratitude and for people, just like her. We get to be sweet together. That is our superpower. I decided to eventually get a driver's license by buying myself my first car. This was not it. And then eventually, thanks to YouTube, my dream car. You can see that as an Avengers sweater that I took in Kirkland, Washington when I drove from Stillwater, Oklahoma to Kirkland, Washington. It's over 40 hours round trip to buy a 2020 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid with a solar roof that has, in some ways, like an autopilot-like feature. That car I drive every day. I've put almost 70,000 miles on it in 3 years. I now love to drive, and every time I get in it, I'm reminded that YouTube paid for that car in cash. Speaking of cash, all the YouTube money I've made over the years also paid off the current house I'm recording in that still is going to go to my mom when she needs a house someday. And paid off a house last year for my fiance and her kids so that they have a home that they can go to every day. And she even wants to pay rent to pay equity into the house, even though she doesn't have to, in order to get her name on the house and earn it because she's that kind of person. What kind of person does that? Just her. We are a unit together, an unstoppable force of love and good in this world. Now, I'm teaching and I'm still being the goofy YouTuber in class at times. My students get to choose what I dress up for on Halloween. I was Gru on the right. On the left, that was one of my social media classes that did a great job. I teach how to produce videos for Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter in my classes now because of my YouTube experience. And my students are going to be far more successful than me in terms of subscriber numbers and revenue numbers and views. That's what I want. I want people to look at this video and say, if that guy did it, I bet I could do even better. In 2024, I was honored as a highlighted professor of the month at Oklahoma State. You can actually click on my community YouTube page and watch a lecture of me talking about the evolution of Budweiser Super Bowl commercials, the highs and lows of that brand, and how they've had to evolve to stay relevant, especially up into the what they call the golden era of their commercials in the 2010s. This is my final takeaway. Happiness is reality minus expectations. If you think that life is going to be easy and that everything's going to be handed to you, you're going to be miserable. Even if you're rich. I never expected anyone to do anything for me, and that was because every time somebody did something for me, I was so thankful. I'm on a gratitude tour now. I want Oklahoma State to get more people from my hometown in New Mexico, in Lincoln County, to use the community college, ENMUR Ruidoso, to have a pipeline. I also want to figure out a way to do more for Missouri students, because Mizzou was the reason why I was not truly homeless in the first place for years. I want to give back to every place that's ever given so much to me. I believe this statement is so powerful. No amount of regret changes the past. No amount of anxiety changes the future, but any amount of gratitude changes the present. I am addicted to this gratitude tour. I want to turn my family's story into a book, and the man who wrote that Mizzou magazine article 15 years ago on discount M&M, I want to pay him to write it. And even if it never makes enough money to even justify what I paid him, it doesn't matter, because it's a thank you to him for starting this whole journey for me. But I hope that this story, this video will be shared, and that people will realize that you can come from someone who's bipolar and who is a single mom who had very little growing up, and a community of good people in this world can get you to a place where you're successful. I am a success because of the people in my life that got me here. Yes, I did some of it, but most of it was because I was provided a safe space to study, to eat, to sleep. And that was all thanks to a countless amount of people in my life. I was in New Mexico for the first time in 20 years in March of 2024. I was honored at the local college with the left side speaking opportunity where I spoke to kids and got a chance to shake hands. And there's an 87% poverty rate now in my hometown. The cost of living has gotten so out of control that the locals can't afford to live there anymore, and people think of Reynosa, New Mexico like it's a town just for rich people to go vacation and gamble and ski. But the locals are really what make these towns, in these New Mexico towns, survive. And that can be said about any town in America, but especially this tourist town of such a small community. They built, in 2024, the High Mountain Youth Project for homeless youth or youth that just needs a safe, free meal and space to go. There's beds in this place. There are computers. It's a dream place that my brothers and I would have gone to maybe every day at points. Our mom would have been a better parent because she would have had a better break from us, because it drives you crazy to raise triplets. It would drive anybody crazy, even if they weren't before. I want to give back to this place. I want to start a scholarship fund for kids who go to this place. I want to be an example for so many low-income people. And maybe you're not low-income from a background, but maybe you do come from an abusive household. Maybe your parents were really doing the best they could, but they were taking their life disappointment out on you. I want you to remember my story and know that you can make it out. And, eventually hopefully you heal. Maybe you won't have a relationship with them like you think you should, but you'll still be able to say thank you because you won't have any regrets. Because when your life has so many blessings, how can you regret it? Because you can't have rainbows without rain. YouTube, I made it. I made it thanks to you all. And now I want to give back. I would love for this book to start the scholarship fund that I'm writing, and also for this video to spread the word about this story so that I can start giving back to all these communities. I am not in it to get rich because I'm already rich with love. I'm here to make sure that people who are in my position, who things are more expensive than ever before, the opportunities that were given to me maybe aren't there anymore, not even financially in some of these places because everything has gotten so expensive. So I want this to be the future of my YouTube channel. It's going to transition to interviews about people. If you know any high school that wants to hear this story, as long as I can make it, I don't even need to be paid. I just want to tell kids that you can make it. I want my life to be now traveling, and when I'm not teaching, helping give back to communities and inspire kids to not just be my star, but be way better than me. Because if I can make it, you can too. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is the longest video I've ever posted on my YouTube channel. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching it. Thank you for staying with it. Please share it. I want a good success story about community love and belief in a kid that had nothing to take off. We have so much negative news in the world. It's about time we celebrated the success of a global community that gave me everything I could ever dream of, thanks to love, kindness, and a lot of faith.